Strange Meeting, a novel by Susan Hill published in 1971, is set during World War I. The title alludes to a poem by Wilfred Owen, a renowned poet of the First World War. The book is divided into 3 parts and includes an afterword by the author. In the opening of Part 1, we meet John Hilliard, who is recuperating from a war injury in a military hospital. He encounters Doctor Crawford, a childhood acquaintance whom John strongly dislikes. Returning home on sick leave, John finds himself unable to sleep. Ironically, his discomfort stems not from his war experiences, but from his aversion to being at home in England. In the presence of his father, mother Constance, and sister Beth, with whom he was once close but now feels distant, John's family fails to acknowledge the realities of his wartime ordeal. When John recovers sufficiently, he eagerly returns to the battlefield. Upon rejoining his battalion, John discovers that many of his comrades have been killed. Colonel Garrett, their commander, appears to have aged significantly. John's former Batman has died, and a new one named Coulter takes his place. John is assigned to work with a new officer named David Barton in a camp where they await their deployment to the front lines. Despite David's inexperience in warfare, he and John quickly form a strong friendship. Another member of their group, Franklin, the new adjutant, seems distant from the others. Towards the end of this section, John and David stumble upon the wreckage of a downed German plane, exposing David to his first sight of a dead body. In Part 2, Company B, the unit to which John and David belong, embarks on a journey towards the Fuvry front line. Due to a shortage of horses, David proceeds on foot. In a letter he is writing, he describes Fuvry as a dilapidated place, its buildings devastated by shelling and German occupation in 1914. After reaching their temporary quarters, known as billets, the men are informed that Harris, a new recruit, has succumbed to fear and hidden himself in the cellar of the building. David engages in a conversation with Harris, persuading him to come out. While David goes to fetch a drink to calm Harris, a shell strikes the billets, resulting in Harris's death. Filled with guilt, David blames himself, believing that if Harris had remained in the cellar, he would have been safe from harm. David pens another letter, admitting that the war is gradually hardening him. John, on the other hand, finds it challenging to accept the constant influx of deaths and the arrival of new recruits. Towards the end of Part 2, David is dispatched to the front lines alongside Gross, a runner, to create a map of the area. While at the front, he witnesses a shelling that claims the lives of several men and observes a fellow soldier being killed by a German sniper. As he returns from the front, David finds himself emotionally numb, having witnessed countless deaths and aware of the staggering daily toll. Part 3 begins with a lengthy letter from David, where he expresses concern over potential censorship, but is determined to inform people back home about the harsh realities of the war. He conveys his belief that they have become dehumanized drones rather than men engaged in battle. Meanwhile, John receives a letter from Beth, informing him of her engagement to Henry Partington, a lawyer, which incites anger in John. At this point, John and David are assigned a reconnaissance mission to spy on the enemy. Accompanied by a group of men, they commence the operation but are forced to retreat when their location is revealed by a flare, resulting in some casualties. In another letter to his loved ones, David confesses that the relentless cycle of deaths is eroding his courage. Soon after, news arrives that they are preparing to advance. David and John engage in a conversation about their post-war plans when a realization dawns upon them. Their aspirations are founded on the assumption that they will both survive until the war's end. As they advance, they lose sight of each other amidst the chaos. John is struck by a shell and seeks refuge in a hole filled with lifeless bodies. The injury costs him his leg, rendering him unable to return to England for a considerable period. Eventually, he receives a letter from David's parents, informing him of David's disappearance and presumed death. When John is finally able to go back to England, he visits David's parents. Though John expresses doubts about David's survival, the novel concludes with a degree of ambiguity regarding David's fate. In her afterword, Hill clarifies her intention for the novel to be not just about war, but also about love. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did and be sure to subscribe. Thank you.